In the 2.5 years we've been recording this podcast, I've never once lied to you. So believe me when I tell you that Sinners is one of the most amazing films I've ever seen in my life. The movie is doing so many different things on so many different levels. It's hard for me to even conceptualize them, let alone spell them out for you. Hey, everybody. This is Jason Herbert. I am the host and creator of Historians of the Movies podcast, where every single week we are talking about movies and the histories behind them. And this week we are talking about Ryan Coogler's Sinners, starring Michael B. Jordan. And for you, I have brought on the most amazing guest, my brand new friend. I'm talking about Zandria Robinson. She is a writer and ethnographer working on race, gender, sound, and the spirit of the crossroads of the living and the dead at Georgetown University. And oh my God, she is amazing. And we just recorded the most amazing conversation for you about Sinners, the brand new film that is out right now. If you haven't seen this film, that's okay. We're going to talk a little bit about the film early on, and then we're going to give you a little break. So if you haven't seen the film, you'll have a spoiler-free introduction to it. Nothing that we say will spoil the movie for you. And then for those of you who have, we do a deep dive into the movie, and it is a really deep dive about a really deep, complex, and fascinating movie. So sit back and relax, because Sinners is next on Historians of the Movies podcast. So I was looking up your work before we met. So you're from the South.
I am. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. Where are you from?
Well, I grew up in Murray, Kentucky, and Breaux Bridge, Louisiana, and Clarksville, Tennessee.
Okay. My sister went to Murray State.
Are you kidding me? I was literally rocking my Murray State hoodie. Like, I flunked out of Murray State twice before I got my PhD.
My sister finished Murray State. She was there from 02 to 05.
Do you know who taught at Murray State University?
Who?
Karen Cox.
Oh, I didn't know Karen taught at Murray State. Okay.
Karen taught in 1998 for 1 year and was like, I have to get the flip out of this job.
Wow.
Isn't that a small world?
Murray is an interesting place, yeah.
That's an interesting word for it, because I got out of there as fast as I could.
Yes.
I don't go there anymore unless I go there for funerals and weddings. And, you know, I just wear black for both at this point in time because I'm jaded. So.
Way to show up to the scene.
That's why I go.
Way to show up to the scene.
I'm like in Wedding Crashers. I'm like, hey, so you're single now, right? You know, so like, yeah, we are. It's so bad. Oh my gosh. Zandria, I am so excited to talk to you about this movie. I've been trying to line this thing up. When I heard it was in production, it's like, that's going to be crazy. And then we both saw it over the weekend. We have so much to talk about today. For everybody here who is listening in right now, get ready for a roller coaster. A couple different things. So Zandria and I are going to talk about this film early on, and we're going to do a spoiler-free initial thing where we tell you how amazing this film is. So if you have not had a chance to see this movie, run to the theaters. Hit pause and run to the theaters and go watch it. So what we'll do is we'll talk for a little bit about our general impressions without spoiling anything for you. And then we'll kind of hit a little dividing line where we'll tell you we're going to go in on this thing. And then give a spoiler-filled thing. So everybody who has seen it already, who's already done the good work, we're going to dive in. So before we do that, Zandria, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Yeah, I'm Zandria Robinson. I'm an associate professor of Black Studies at Georgetown University, and I write a lot about the South and race and culture and pop music and grief and death.
Oh my gosh. You were the perfect person to talk to. And you've written some books, one of which I have right here.
Oh, yes. So yes. The OG book.
The OG. I emailed, so I'm tight with UNC Press. And so I emailed Sonia immediately when you said you would come on. I was like, Sonia, I need this. She was literally heading out on vacation and threw a couple copies in the mail for me so I could look at your amazing work.
I love UNC so much.
They're great.
They're great people.
I love them so much too. And your book is like, oh my gosh, the ties here. This ain't Chicago. Chicago's all over this film.
And they actually say that line. This is not a spoiler, but they say that line.
Right? But yeah, that's not a spoiler. There's so much here. So, all right, let's just jump in here. We both saw this film over the weekend. What are your general impressions of this film? What did you think when you saw it? Did you know anything about the movie going in? And what were your thoughts as you were watching it and then like got done?
I had only seen the trailer, and I am, as a Southerner, I'm against non-Southerners doing Southern things, especially when it comes to the
Accents.
accents. Also, also I am, a little bit horror averse, especially when it has to do with Jim Crow, because I feel like must we add a supernatural layer on top of the already grotesque lived reality of the thing? But this film was so gorgeous and so good and so thoughtfully written, so tender with the material that I wasn't even mad about the accents. That's how good this film was. I was like, I am willing to overlook any of. I'm in the world. I'm there. I'm with you. I'm loving it. It was a splendid film that really gave us a look into what is a big city for that region, Clarksdale, Mississippi. Gave us a look into a big city at a particular pivotal time, interwar Mississippi, which is, somewhat understudied and has a particular resonance for what comes after. And it gives us a luscious look at everyday Black life and leisure. And I loved it.
Yeah. I if I interject myself into my own pot here, like I was sitting there just with my jaw agape. And I have come to
Mm.
expect this from Kugler, from his work. And you and I were just kind
Mm.
of talking before the pod about how much you appreciated he was coming with like original stuff. The thing I've always loved about this is like his range, right? He can do the big films, he can do the quieter stuff, but I was like, this film does both. Like there's all like the
Yes.
pacing of this movie, it's like this film is very deliberate and it's not worried about
Yes.
like rushing to get to the point. It is gonna there is a build and build and
Right. Because
build.
the everyday is the point. The quotidian is the point.
Oh, thank you so much. And I don't think this is a spoiler at all. The thing that I really dug as well was just frankly how much they're trying to tackle here and how successfully. It's not like they're
Mm.
trying to hit everything, but there's like this acknowledgement in bits and pieces. Say the fact that they're like in Mississippi and there's like we're in Choctaw country and we see Choctaw people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I
Mm-hmm.
was like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it's like, and it's not. It's almost like it's not even a big deal. It's like, yeah, you know,
Yeah, no.
we're Choctaw vampire hunters. That's what we do.
This this
You
is
know.
this is this is our life. This is our life. This is what we do. Yes, for sure.
That said, the cast of this film. You would
Woo!
jump into it?
I mean, every single person was so perfectly cast.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna mess up people's names, so I'm not gonna go.
Go
But
for it.
the preacher
You
boy,
do it. I won't.
preacher boy,
Oh my gosh, yes.
preacher boy. What a magnificent acting debut!
Mm-hmm.
What a stellar and perfection for the role in so many different ways. And this is also the casting. Obviously, wonderful casting that Kugler always uses, but his direction gives us a different dimension to these folks' performance that I don't think, I mean, he's really coaxing it out of them. The nuance is there in the face, the nuance is in the body, like they're acting.
Yeah.
And of course the I was skeptical of like how are they going to pull this off with the
Mm-hmm.
twins, with
Yeah.
Michael B. Jordan playing both of these roles. But he does an excellent job. And again, this is Kugler with the coaxing,
Mm-hmm.
really delineating between these twin characters, not just in what they say, but just in their bodies, in their movements. It's so powerful. It's so powerful. Then we've got the medicine woman. Miss Annie. I'm just like, I love her in
Did
everything,
she not still
but
every scene she was in?
she stole. The theft was real in every single one. And again, it's this embodied thing that he gets out of everyone in this
Mm-hmm.
in this cast, in this performance, that's very present, that's very almost unctuous in a way. It is just so effervescent and gushy and sweaty. I love it. I love it. I love it.
This
I
is a
love it.
sexy movie.
But again, in a quotidian way,
Yeah.
it's tapping into this kind of everyday sensory,
Mm-hmm.
erotic in the Audre Lorde sense, the everyday sensory of Black life. I was also taken with Delroy Lindo.
I was waiting for you to say that.
I was so very taken with him in this role. Um, when he first comes onto the screen, when they roll up on him on the screen, um, I know he's also a scene stealer, a show stealer, but the way that Coogler uses him in this way, it's forward, it's back, it's exactly where it needs to be. It's shaped. He's shaped into the rest of the cast in a way that is just so beautiful, and you can tell that everybody knows that they're working with this marvelous vet, but that the melding, everyone's elevated in this space. It's really sensational, honestly.
Can I tell you? So I'm sitting there, and I didn't know that Delroy Lindo was in this film. I was doing everything I could to keep this movie a surprise for me. I'd seen
Right,
the
right.
trailers, right, and I'm like, okay, Michael B. Jordan, Haley Steinfeld. Okay, these are the people I know. Kugler, obviously. So I'm
Mm-hmm,
expecting maybe
mm-hmm,
some of the
mm-hmm.
Kugler mainstays, if you will, right?
Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh.
And when we got to Lindo, I almost but did not quite yell in the theater because I was
I
like,
think I yelped
oh,
a little
hell
bit.
yeah. Right? Because I was like,
Mm-hmm,
yes, at this point in time, you're about to get
mm-hmm,
another hour and
mm-hmm.
45 minutes of Delroy Lindo being Delroy Lindo. And he is
Yes,
one of my favorite actors, bar none. I
yes.
love this guy. Um, and then also Jack O'Connell, who we haven't seen a lot of recently, right? He was
I
good,
said, okay. I said, okay.
right?
when that was a perfect choice. Perfect choice. Because there are ways that this kind of character in this kind of film can be too on the nose and it can be annoying for us. He slips into this role, he wears it, he dangles it. I mean, it's gorgeous to watch. Kind of almost root for him.
A little. That's your best villain too, right? Which is like
Yes,
to have
yes,
a really good villain, you have to kind of empathize at times
yes,
with the
yes,
villain, like Thanos,
yes,
right? It's like, okay,
yes,
got to kill half the
yes,
people in the universe, but here's why. You really have
yes,
to, or else it's just
yes.
a. And the thing I liked about Remic's character, the villain here, is like there's all these hints of this past thing that he says. We'll get into in the spoiler part of this pod. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that make you think this man has gone through some trauma on his own and has just
Yeah,
gone right.
yeah,
He's been
and
turned into this thing.
it's what Coogler is doing in this film is giving us a complex self with where we can have deep empathy for everyone. And like I said, because O'Connell is in this role, he's so perfect that you don't get to immediately sort of put him into the, typical civil rights era, old South era movie box where it's so easy. It's not that easy. And of course the dialogue, the things he says gives even more context and backstory to that.
Yeah. All right. Um, Real quickly, you and I are talking. This is going to be the most obvious question we're going to ask today. Should people go and see this film? Like, what would you tell people who are like, "Oh,
Absolutely.
I'm scared. I'm scared of vampires," or I don't know if I can handle the trauma of things like that. This
Let
is a
me tell
heavy
you
film.
what I told my chiropractor today. She was saying that horror is not her thing. And I said, horror is not my thing either. And I will say that even if you are the jumpiest of the jump scare people, this one doesn't do what you think it's going to do, one. Um, and the level is almost tasteful. there's almost something. Yes, it's a very delicate gore, I would say, even in its grotesquerie. So that's for the jump scare horror averse shy. For those of us who are like me, who are like, Not only am I horror shy, I don't want to see um, the multi-layered anti-Black racism on top of horror. I don't want to see that. That's not this film. And so that's for people who have reservations. I would encourage anybody who is interested in any remote way in thinking with, through, around, holding hands with Black life in its multi-layered gorgeousness. You got to see it. And there is a scene that I'm sure that we'll spend a lot of time talking about in the spoilers. There, if for nothing, there is one scene, a transcendent scene that you must see.
That scene is one of the most remarkable scenes. I had to start deleting people's responses when I posted some stuff about this on Blue Sky because they kept
Mm-hmm.
talking about this scene, and I was like, "You cannot ruin
Mm-hmm.
this scene, and we're not going to ruin it
Mm-hmm.
for you yet
No,
either."
people have
Nope,
to. I
nope.
think,
You
yeah, and I think it does what great art can do, and that is to really have a deep resonance with the viewer, and to the point where you're participating, and there's this kind of humanistic, like thing that happens there. Yeah, so I think that people should see it for that, if nothing else.
can I tell you, like the amazing thing about this is that you and I both were calling it the scene. We have not discussed the scene outside of like what we're talking about right now. We both know exactly what we're talking about. We're both having those feelings and
Yes,
stuff like that.
yes,
I think that this scene is going to be kind of like remembered, kind of like the Goodfellas scene when they go through the back of the restaurant and everybody knows that that's like that famous shot. This scene is going to
yes,
be that scene for
yes.
all of film eternity. It's so
I think so.
go see this movie for this scene. You'll know what we're talking about when you see the scene.
When you get to it,
You're gonna know it. It's like it's. I was watching it, and it's like there's this understanding that you're watching it, and then the scene becomes the scene as you're watching the scene.
yes, yes, and I think
Magic.
too that it's absolute magic, and I think too that Kugler can do this. Kugler has the skills to do this. He's done this in Black Panther, but it's something about the way it's done when he's outside of the confines of franchise material, that and specifically in a story about the South, specifically in this kind of story, that his scene making capabilities just are at their apex.
Okay, enough of our build up. Okay, if you're listening in, you need to stop
Mm.
listening. You need to stop paying attention to your children or your job or your dog. Run out and go see this movie. We're
Go see
like,
the
this is your
movie.
pause. Go see this movie. Pause right now. Everybody else who's like been good people and seen this film already, you can continue listening in because we're about to spoil the shit out of this film for you right now.
Yes, let's do it.
This film opens up 1932, Clarksdale, Mississippi. You talked about it earlier. This is a big town for the Black
This is a
community
big
in
town.
Mississippi time, right?
This is a big city. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Smoke and Stack are both returning from Chicago. Seems like they're disillusioned by it. Like we get a sense that of what they've been up to a little bit later on. There's all these allusions to the Great Migration, and then we get to
Mm-hmm.
see this idea that like maybe this is the Great Migration is kind of coming back this way. There's some people who head north and kind of come back. For people who are not familiar with what the Great Migration was, or what it meant to African American communities in the diaspora of the era, can we talk a little bit about what that was? How Black folk were in the South and found them, and found ways to get to Chicago, Philly, New York,
Mm-hmm.
wherever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there are sort of these two periods of mass movement of Black people from the South. And I will say that this mass movement also includes white people and other people. But it's profound for US history because we like to see where the Black people are going, because when they come somewhere in numbers, they radically change the place. And so you have, kind of this first wave of folks in the early 20th century who are heading north from Mississippi off into Chicago and Detroit. From Georgia, they're heading further up to DC, to Philly, sometimes to New York. And you've got folks from kind of New Orleans-ish, Texas-ish, sometimes heading to the West. And then there's what we call the second wave, which is around the World War II era, which is where even more folks leave and head up to these same spaces. And almost every major city, and then some towns also get these like influx of Black migrants. They're coming to escape things in the South, the violence and repression in the South. They're coming to escape low wages in the South. They're coming for jobs, often in manufacturing, later on in the auto industry. And this movement of people continues basically from the first half of the 20th century all the way up through the 1960s. And then we began to see that more African Americans are returning South than are leaving the South. And this is due to a lot of factors. Some of it is sort of the somewhat end of legal segregation. Some of it is folks are retiring. Some of it is we got to go home and take care of elders. And that southward pull continues significantly today, such that by 2008, Atlanta is number 2 for Black population and has overtaken longtime number 2 Chicago, which had been, a significant and primary migration destination. And so in the film, the twins coming back from Chicago kind of disrupts that traditional narrative that all these Black folks left the South and there was no one left, apparently. And then all
Everyone's
these Black
gone.
folks came back. Right, everyone's gone. But it's important to note that over 50% of the Black population remained in the South. It's just that historians and sociologists pretty much are always looking at who's moving, where are they going, how are things changing in these new places, where is the Negro problem going? But it continues, right, quote unquote, in the U.S. South, because there's still plenty of Black folks there. But what the movie does is kind of disrupt that simple narrative and say people are coming back and forth all the time, because they are. In fact, and it's interesting that there are men figures here coming back, because it's more often women who are making that return back home, because they're coming to care for a sick relative, or they've left some children behind as they've gone to work in the city or something like that. So it's often these single women that are coming home, especially in this era that we're talking about, 1930s or so, Mississippi, 1930s, 1940s. But there were plenty of folks that it was a circle back and forth from the North to the South. And oftentimes it was because you might have struck out a luck up South. You might have done something you weren't supposed to do. You might be coming back to take care of relatives, or the famous Gladys Knight song, "L.A. proved too much for the man," and he had to come back on the midnight train to Georgia. His Hollywood career didn't work out because he sucked at the guitar or whatever. So these are the kinds of nuances that I think this film does a good job of really bringing about when kind of complicating our traditional sense of the South.
Yeah, and I think, the cool thing that this thing does, and I keep thinking about all the teachable moments in this film. Like as a scholar, I'm like, oh, there's so much stuff you can just take. You can take a snip of this and just open it up to students, and be like, here's why we're talking about this or whatever, right? Smoke and Stack are pretty disillusioned. Like they reference like it's not all happiness up in Chicago, right? I mean, you talk about people fleeing the South to like go to this better space where Black folk are supposed to be treated better, but that wasn't necessarily the case in these cities, right?
No. And what Black folks found in these migration destinations were more of the wage repression. They were often used as strike breakers. They were unable to join unions to organize themselves in some ways. There was significant segregation in the sense that they were piled high into these small spaces that often yielded all kinds of illness and disease. And so you're still finding similar conditions. I think what is it? They say plantation with tall buildings, or they use some quip to describe what Chicago is. And I think this is the experience that many, despite the sort of like, because there are two kinds of propaganda happening at this time, during the Great Migration era. There is the come here, everything's great, you can make it, everything's much better than the South, you can walk tall and be proud as a man, all of that. And there is an anti-migration propaganda that white folks are doing in the South as they're losing all their labor. And they're saying, you're going to go there and you're going to die. And everything's terrible up there. You know, but we know that it wasn't that. There were still lynchings, there was still racial violence, there was still police violence, there's still anti-Black violence in all of these places where Black folks went and found themselves. But certainly we can't undersell or understate the rampant violence, vigilante violence often in the South that drove people out. There were folks who needed, I have relatives, you needed to leave the South in the middle of the night and you can come back. And you never came back. And then, you know, there were folks who, if they came back, it had to be clandestine. So that smoking stack can come back with this critique, which I think is a critique that many folks who had the experience had, that they could come back and have the critique and do so. And, you know, no one's chasing them. There's a little specter of that, but no one comes, no one's chasing them, and they're all right. It just complicates and shows us a different side of the way that culture between these regions got shared.
There's a quip here that I always used to like to make when I was teaching, which is about the fragility of white folk and race and labor, because it's like there's this thought. It's like, oh no, you're taking all the jobs. You're go get out of here. We don't want. Oh, what do we do? I don't.
What are we gonna do?
Come back. Come back. Come back. Not that we won't see that again anytime in American history.
Not at all.
What about? Was there an attitude, Zandria, when you about the people, say, back home in Mississippi or in Georgia or Alabama or other places, who like saw these folks go to Chicago or New York or wherever, say, and then they come back? Was there a sense of like, oh, you had to was there a pushback against folks that you notice?
Oh yeah. I mean, folks are like,
what's the identity going on? Okay.
Yeah. What you doing back here? I thought you was big shit in Chicago, and someone kind of says that in the film. I think that's a very common refrain, because the sense is that, like, obviously sometimes you gotta leave, but sometimes when people are choosing to leave, they're choosing to leave, families and communities and networks and all of that. And it's a pain point. It's a pain point for the folks who are quote unquote left behind, especially if they're continuing to care for family members and other folks. Like, they're holding it down. So it's like, don't come up in here with your shit because we've been here holding this down this whole time. So I think there is also that sense. And I think that sense actually continues today. And that's kind of a thing that came up a lot. I wasn't necessarily expecting. And how I came to the book title, This Ain't Chicago, because I was at Northwestern getting my PhD. And when I would show them the, informed consent form, and they would see Northwestern and they didn't know I was from Memphis necessarily, they would say, I hope you know this ain't Chicago. And that came up a lot. Like, this is not the place that you think it is. And I was like, oh, I know, I know where I'm at. I know where I'm at. But yeah, I think that those sentiments continue. It becomes a class division because people in the South are seen as backwards and slow and green. And you can see between the first and the second migration, the Black folks who had come up in the first migration, who were able to really like establish themselves and scrap themselves up and, enter into some semblance of the middle class, were very against these green new migrants coming, who reminded them of old Bama ways and who reminded them of just, aspects of home that they felt, were beneath them. Like, this is also the time when, the new Negro, this idea is flourishing. And that seemed to be something that was cut off from Southerners. Although, of course, it is Southern intellect and ingenuity and organizing that gets us, the major wins of the civil rights movement. So this idea that that Southerners were slow and backwards and docile came about as a part of this like migration narrative, an intra-racial narrative that Black Northerners had about Black Southerners that just wasn't true.
I wonder if this is common to like the immigrant experience period, right? Which is like when we look at, say, the most recent round of elections, I've spent the last 20 some odd years in Florida. I'm in Colorado now. But like when I see the voter turnout in Miami amongst Cuban Americans, amongst elder Cuban
Mm-hmm.
Americans, it's like, oh
Mm-hmm.
no, we're different than the new arrivals, than the
Oh,
new
yes.
Hispanics who
Yes,
have
for
arrived.
sure.
We did it the right way.
For sure.
Therefore, it's the new
For sure.
round. You know, you see, so you say that, and I wonder if on a personal level, because this is a thing that I've wrestled with maybe more internally as a Southern white man, and I wonder if it's different for you. It's like, you know, as I grew up in Kentucky and then I left, you know, and I actually went south to
Mm,
Florida, but that's a whole other space. That's for
mm-hmm.
another podcast. But you know, I left, right, and I was the only person who left. And then every time I come back, I
Mm,
always wrestle with this idea that like, do they think I thought I was too good for them or something like that? You know, and they
mm,
never say
mm-hmm.
that, but I
Mm-hmm.
always
Mm-hmm.
have you had that experience too after
Yeah.
leaving
I
Memphis?
mean, yeah, I mean, I actually didn't get to have that experience in a way because I was always back. I didn't stay gone for for long enough. And I think too also and this is about being from a city that, you know, was at one point 70% black and
Hmm.
is probably around 62, 63% black now. You can be a lot of different people in your life. You can stay in that one town, you can stay in that city, and you can be a lot of different people. So if you move to another neighborhood, somebody might think think that you think you better than them when you come back. So there's not just about leaving the city. It's any marker of sort of difference away from that, wherever the authentic home space is. But this is true that it's the same for a lot of stayers versus returners. It's true for across multi-generational um, multi-generational times of immigration, that the folks who have been there longer are and who have been able to establish themselves are going to have a sense about these newcomers, and a similar dynamic is going to happen for when people go and come. Once they're back in the community, and oftentimes because it's only for a little bit of time, like you're home for Christmas or you're you're home to resettle. And you know what? There are so many Southern films that deal with just this kind of thing. Like Welcome Home, Roscoe Jenkins. This is a guy that's gone out to LA, changed his name, has a successful TV show, but he's coming back to Georgia for a family event, and he's going to get his ass handed to him Southern style, literally in in some ways, to sort of teach him the down home ways and root him back into his humility. So there's also something about humility, humbleness, um, which also has within it, humiliation. That's about, bringing somebody down to size two in these kinds of situations.
We talked a little bit earlier about, you know, Remix, you know, this complicated story behind our lead bad
Oh,
guy
yes.
vampire,
Let's get
right?
into it.
Well, I
Let's
want
get
to wait
into
for
it.
him for a second because I want to ask you though quickly though and you were like, hey, you know, we have to identify with him a little bit, right? But the people we
Hmm.
don't have to identify with is the Klan because they're like,
We do not have to identify with the Klan, and they're
because
perfectly
like,
cast.
right?
They're
Because
perfectly
like
cast.
it's not my favorite scene in the film, but it's maybe my towards the end when it's like I looked down, I was like, well, we got half an hour. Like, what happens? And
What's
then it's
happening? Yeah,
like,
yeah.
and there's like 20 minutes of Michael Jordan just shooting the Klan.
Yes, that's
You
so the
know,
Klan.
I was like, this is great. It was like this whole other coda. I was like, let's go. You know, I
it's
was
an
like,
it's an
because
it's an it's a speculative achievement, but also one
it's a happy
that
story.
gets, yes, but it's also one that gets at the fact that there was often armed resistance.
Thank you.
That black Southerners were not just like laying down, like people had pistols. They might not have had, these automatic weapons, but people had pistols and they were going to defend themselves. This is what you did. You had to risk that. And that's often how sometimes people ended up having to leave the South in the middle of the night because they had defended themselves in these ways. And I think, I feel like the Klan's presence is like necessary, I guess, a necessary evil in this kind of film. You don't need it per se, but I think that Coogler has it there to kind of showcase, like, okay, well, what is happening with the time what's happening with this moment? Where are the white folks and what are they doing in this time? Well, they own property and they are sort of continuing white supremacy in some ways, but they're, engaged in seemingly being nice, seemingly doing business, because they're supposed to be more enlightened. By this time, the Klan has sort of declined in significance in some ways because they took a big hit during the Depression. And people are just like, I guess we too poor to be. And they've had their heyday.
We can't afford white robes anymore.
We can't afford our robes.
This is me crying for the Klan.
Yes, we can't afford our robes. And they have, done so much significant damage. But there's also this kind of sentiment that they need to rebrand. So they're really just rebranded as citizens councils and as other kinds of organizations that protect the community. So whether or not the Klan is dead, as he declares, which of course is not true, and especially not true in Mississippi. So if we're thinking about the Mississippi context, but regardless of whether they call themselves the Klan or not, white organizations that met out anti-Black violence in organized ways continue to exist, and are operating in the South as we see. But this time, they get their ass handed to them.
I kept trying to think about this film, and the thing I keep trying to think about is like, I don't know, Zandria, that this is a vampire movie. I really don't. Like, this is a movie that has vampires.
This is a movie that has this is definitely a movie that has vampires, but it's not. It
definitely has vampires. It has a lot more vampires as the movie goes on.
Yes.
Everybody turns into a vampire. But I kept thinking about the threat of white folk to these Black communities. Like this whole thing, like Mary's got to keep slipping in and out. What's she here? Blah, blah, blah. She's a Black woman who's white coated, and then like we see like when Remick shows up at that first house, you're like, oh, there's just, okay, so they're a hillbilly couple, blah, blah, blah. They're fine and sweet and good. And then you see, oh, there's the robe there. Oh, wait, nice people.
Right, for sure.
Right?
For sure.
Like these unthreatening people are members of the Klan. I just kept thinking the whole time, I'm like, this movie is about confronting white supremacy.
Yeah, and I think, when we see their Klan robe in the back, it's two things are happening. Remick is banking on their racism in order to eat them. that they will not only see him as a safe person because he's white, but also that they will share his anti-indigenous sentiment, and as such will then invite him in. So it's kind of only incidental that, like, again, Kugler doesn't even have to show the robe. He doesn't even have to show the robe, because what we have there is an exchange of whiteness that they understand. In fact, the robe only functions to me in that scene to sort of make it like, well, they deserve it. They deserve to be made undead because of their membership. But also, I think there's a comment there on intra-racial class solidarities amongst white folks. That we see that the only sort of Klan folks that we've seen up to that point is the business owner. Who's selling them the land. Hogwood, which is hilarious.
Perfect name for
Hogwood.
Hogwood.
We only see Hogwood, and he doesn't, of course, claim the Klan, but wink, wink, he's the Klan. But that's the only person that we've seen that we can associate with the Klan. And then we see this couple, and they're out in the country, and they're not wearing a button-down shirt and all of that. So they may have been doing agricultural work that day. And so this is a marker of intra-racial white class solidarities that happened because they come together to oppress Black people. And then, of course, white elite people oppress working class white people.
Thank you so much, right? Because like so much of this is like white folk and Black folk worked alongside one another when they were poor in the South. And yet that did not stop many white folk from aligning
Yes.
themselves with wealthies instead of
Yes.
same people in their
For
class.
sure.
We
For sure.
continue to see that along voting lines
For sure.
today.
For sure.
Can we talk about Sammy and his guitar? We're going to come back to Riddick.
Yes. Oh my God. Preacher boy.
Okay, because the first thing I
Sammy
thought
and this guitar.
first thing I thought, and I'm sure you did too, was thinking story Tommy Johnson selling Soul Devil when I saw a guitar in
Yes.
the church, right? Um,
Yes.
do we want to talk about that about these links
Yeah. I
between
mean,
music and the
so
soul?
the Clarksdale, actually, the Highway 49,
Mm-hmm.
uh 61, these legendary blues highways, in and out of Mississippi, notably, leaving from Clarksdale, that area, Greenwood, Greenville, going up to Memphis, um and now has historical markers, blues highway, and so these are sites that we think of now. Robert Johnson is a bluesman who is reputed to have sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads in order to be able to play the way that he plays. And this kind of is a somewhat convoluted, almost white. I want to call this a white, and there are music scholars who know this better than me. My good colleague Elijah Wald. Um, but basically, this story, which is really a story about a Yoruba deity, and there are many such deities that are deities of the crossroads. But this is really a story about decisions that one might make at a crossroads. And there are crossroads spirits, whether it is like notably Eshu or Papa Legba. There are these crossroads spirits that, you make agreements with, you make contracts with, that will help you to achieve something. And so it's not the devil, but in the US, both white folks and uh, anti-black people began to see some of these crossroads deities as the devil, right? The devil is giving you a choice. And so also, it's just a cool story if you sold your soul to the devil. And white folks will like it, if you play the blues. It's a good marketing tactic in certain kinds of ways. But underneath it is this um, really longer tradition of a crossroads as a site of liminality, as a site of birth, as a site of death, and as a site where something otherworldly can come into being. And that's certainly what we're hearing when we're hearing Sammy sing and play.
He's so good in this thing. We should have told people to start with. You have to listen all the way. You have to watch the film all the way through the credits because there's
Yes,
just like
the score, the music, the soundtrack, everything. Um, it's a deeply musical film too. Yeah,
I
yeah.
argue with people all the time because I like to do that and I don't have any friends anymore. But but I always, I'm always talking about how like I think Singles is one of the great, if not the single greatest soundtrack I've ever heard. But that might be because I'm tail end of Gen X and so forth, right? And I kept thinking as we were listening, it's like, oh my god, this score! Oh my god, this score!
The score,
This score! Like that
marvelous.
dark, like that. Oh my gosh, that continually sets the tone in this thing. Coming back to your story about the crossroads, I kept thinking about "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou," where he's like, "You sold your soul to the devil." He's like, "I wasn't using it." I was like, I can't not laugh at that every time I hear it.
Yes, yes.
You talk about race and class in this era, and we see the Chinese couple who are in this film.
Yes.
And it seems like they're able to kind of navigate across lines. I do too, right? Because like it complicates the traditional ideas of like a black South or the white South or a black and white South, right? Can we talk about what they're doing here in this film and like what that does for you?
There is a classic text by the historian Jim Lowen called Mississippi Chinese. And I almost said out loud when they came onto the screen, the Mississippi Chinese,
Really?
But it's terrible to holler out.
We can do what we want. We have PhDs. We're the boss.
But I almost did that because important book that details and complicates the sort of black-white narrative of Mississippi. Now, certainly Mississippi did have this, biracial color line, as most of the United States did, but Chinese immigrants who were laborers, again, brought in for labor reasons, um, sometimes they had come over they had been brought over and they were in the Caribbean and they came to Mississippi. Other times they came straight over. They're doing railroad work. They're doing agricultural work. And eventually they begin to open grocery stores. And so to see this couple and their beautiful grocery store, sometimes later it was laundries or dry cleaners, dry goods, but and sundries, things like that. But to see this couple, and I don't know, there was a level of there was a comfort that I experienced because this is my experience of the small town South. And also, when you're in the South, you are just as likely to, if you see a person of Asian descent, they're just as likely to have a Southern accent come out of
That's
their
what I
mouth
loved on this.
as as they are to have any other kind of accent.
Yes.
And so it's just, it felt immediately like home. And I really appreciated the nuance because it gives you an understanding of how Chinese immigrants in particular were sort of navigating this space between Black and white. They are still at this time, they are considered non-white and they have to go to school with Black people. Many Chinese immigrants. There's a case maybe a few years before this movie where a family tries to sue. So they're sue for their because many people did this over the course, in the early 20th century America, suing to be white essentially. Japanese people did this. Lots of different people did this, and in Mississippi they lost. So in this particular case, eventually they're able to get access to white schools, and part of access to whiteness is anti-Blackness. Is being willing to toe the anti-Black line. And eventually they do that in a lot of ways. But in this moment, we're seeing a significant ease and solidarity in this time between the Chinese community, the Chinese grocers, the Chinese couple and family, and the Black community. Immediately, she's going to help with the opening of the juke joint.
When you were doing your research for This Ain't Chicago, did you come across stories like those of Mary, who biracial people who coded one way or another, and then were wrestling with how they fit into one community or another? Because I'm wondering, Mary very strongly wants to be part of the African American community in Mississippi, but is kind of feels like she's kind of being pushed other ways. Like Stack says, well, we got you married off to a white guy in Chicago. You're good over there, or something like that. It's like,
yeah. And that character is so interesting to me, and I think it's a place where there could be a little bit more nuance because I think about her character not as a Black woman who is white coded, but a white woman with a Black ancestor. And so that there were many people who, have her skin tone, affect, phenotype, etc., who you just knew they were Black because they were always with Black people. They never left. they stayed in the community and they were known as Black. And oftentimes you would have white people who had decided, I don't want to be white. I'm going to be with the Black people. So then other white people were like, fine, you be over there with the niggas then. So, and we will code you as such. And so there's this way in which we don't get enough of her backstory other than her ancestor and her close relationship with the twins' mother. And there's with her, etc. We don't get enough of her backstory to know truly what she wants other than to be with Stack. And that to me doesn't necessarily mean camaraderie within community and affinity with the Black community, but with this particular Black man and with the love and labor of the mother, the Black mother that had been there. And as such, she's the one that truly fucks them up because she's gonna try to go and talk to these white people, and it's like, girl, don't. All money ain't good money, and so I think that um, her behavior actually indicates that she doesn't have the necessary Black epistemology that would have said no. She thinks she's doing them a favor because she is operating with the idea somehow that white people are harmless.
Mm. Is she on? Do you think that there's a bit of a white savior thing within her where she's just like let me go and
Yes.
I can fix this.
Yes. I mean, yeah, it's also to this, she believes that Stack has taught her well.
Mm-hmm.
She knows how to negotiate. She knows how to it's a little bit of her own hubris, more so than a white savior complex. It's her own hubris that she believes that she will be able to negotiate with these people. And it's very I think that's such an interesting thing that Kugler does with her, because it allows for us to really see what has happened and what is going to happen, because she's almost bitten in that first interaction.
Mm.
And of course she is. But we see her sort of not catch on until the very end. And again, this is a problem with her epistemology. If you put her next to Annie, Annie's like, immediately no.
Everybody lives if they listen to Annie.
Everybody lives if they listen to Annie. Trust Black women 101. Everybody lives if they listen to Annie.
Well, if Grace doesn't invite everybody in, Annie's like, all we gotta do is make it till dawn. We're good here. Just hang tight. They cannot come in. They can burn the place down, I guess, but they can't come in. I loved Annie.
And we can forgive Grace her anger. Because she's trying to protect her baby.
Can I tell you, there was a thing here that I really liked, which is that you've got Michael B. Jordan with both Haley Steinfeld and with Annie, right? Two radically different appearances in women. Haley Steinfeld looks like Haley Steinfeld, and then Annie's a big, voluptuous Black woman. And it's like you still have the same guy, and you accept both, right? I really dug the sexuality of both women, how it was presented as this is women come in different shapes, right? What about the spiritual, though, guidance? I guess let's unpack Annie, I guess, is a thing, because she's got this amazing sexiness to her, spirituality.
I could talk about it all day because, first off, we come to a shack in the woods, I'm like, oh shit, it's gonna go down. Because traditionally, this is where the medicine woman or the medicine man or the medicine person, this is where they are. And she's got an apothecary in there. She's got her herbs. She's got everything that she needs. One of the first things that she does is she fixes his mojo bag. She replenishes it because she's created this mojo bag for him when he's left to provide protection. And we kind of know now this is why the twins were even able to do what they did in Chicago and to survive and to make it back south, because they have her spiritual protection. He's literally wearing the mojo bag. She fixes up the mojo bag to replenish it, to restore it, so that he will continue to be protected. And I think there's this sort of deep moment of tenderness with the fixing of the bag, with their first sort of, reacquaintance with each other after he's been away for some time. She's also, of course, questioning why he's back, but probably obviously quite happy that he is. And we also learn that they share a child that they lost, and there is a gravesite that is also an altar for the child. And he's come to bring flowers that he's gotten from the store there. And so there's so much. And then, of course, they get to it. they get to it on the table. And so then there's so much in that one very short scene. I mean, I would say that's also a pretty transcendent scene, in the sense that it deals with grief, it deals with spirituality, it deals with death, it deals with the power of protection. And we're getting to see, there are references to her Louisiana heritage, and Louisiana spirituality is varied and diverse, but more than likely there are some Vodou traditions, there's some voodoo traditions, and also some hoodoo traditions. And all of these traditions in the New World would have been descended from various African traditional religions of the Bantu Congo or the Yoruba people or the Bambara people. And so you've got like this site both in the sort of woods or out of the way home. Inside it, there is this apothecary of herbs, very central to African traditional religions. And then you've got this beautiful story of their history together, which is full of pain, but also this deep longing for one another that just lets you know that no matter what happens, they will be together.
Yeah, she really carries this film
Mm-hmm.
in so many different
Mm-hmm.
ways. Um,
Mm-hmm.
let's just talk about it. Let's talk about the scene.
Uh,
Let's get into it. What are
oh
your
my
thoughts?
God.
Did you know what was
I
happening when it
just
happened or what?
yes. When it began, the minute a masquerade came on. So the scene that we're talking about is um they're in the juke joint and Sammy is playing and there's kind of a voiceover narrating a little bit about what's happening, which I don't even think you need. But I I understand the work that it does. And the dance floor becomes this Afrofuturist space. And by Afrofuturist, I mean something that deals with time, not just futures, but past, present, and futures as they exist in one space. And so we get to see various masquerades. These are when folks are wearing the spirit of a deity or an orisha. We get to see various masquerades come on. And so we know that the ancestors are present. We know that the spirits are present. They have come to dance. At one point, we see a Chinese ancient one. And then, so we get to see all these different um, folks come into being from the past, quote unquote. And then we also get to fast forward to the future where we see DJing and we see hip hop. And so it's this narrative about the power of music to transcend time, space, history, class, culture, all of that. But it's a specific narrative about the power of Black music, blues, and its multiple various continuations, whether we are thinking about the tradition of the griot and the storyteller and the dance deities, spirits, etc., or whether we're thinking about, the profound signifying that hip hop does on all of these pasts, that all of that is present in one place and in one time, and that to play the blues is to always already be playing with these spirits, past, present, and future. It was just to see them all present and dancing and just ecstatic. And you're watching the scene and just more and more are coming to the floor. And I think people who dance, people who sing, people who do theater, people who play music have these moments where they can feel the power of the spirit. But to see it be manifest on the screen in this way, I tell you what, the club's not like that no more. They doing bottle service. The ancestors ain't coming to the club no more.
I want to go to this club is what I want to do because as it starts to unfold, I had read that there was all I'd read before this film was like there's going to be a moment in which this film turns. It's all I read. I was like, get me away from the rest of this. I don't want to. I don't want to read anymore. Right. So I knew there was something that happens, but I don't know what. And you're absolutely right. When the first ancestor shows up, and then there's Jimi Hendrix-esque kind of guy who's
Yes.
playing.
Jimi Hendrix type kind of Sun Ra kind of Parliament Funkadelic George Clinton.
Something. Right? And I'm like, what the fuck is happening here? And this becomes that scene where here's the thing, Zandria. I don't think I think Ryan Coogler had one chance to make this scene because I don't think anyone can ever try to do this scene ever again.
Oh God, no. And actually, as juke joint scenes go, which I'm typically against, as juke joint scenes go, this one is quite excellent. Another juke joint scene that I like very much is from the film Idlewild.
Oh, I got one for you
And
too.
there's
Go on.
it, and it's also a transcendent temporal thing because you have Big Boy's character Rooster rapping, and you have the sort of cabaret girls dancing. You have this, so it's kind of a multi-time um, thing that's happening in that space too, and I think it's done well. What's your juke joint scene?
Have you seen Live by Night?
No.
Oh my gosh, Andrew. Okay, it is. We did this on the
Okay,
pod with
tell me.
Sarah McNamara. It's set in Ybor City, inside like Tampa, right? And it's this amazing center of like Afro-Cuban. That's the big aspect here. Is like there's this
Mm-hmm,
Afro-Cuban thing going on during Prohibition and all that. It's just
mm-hmm,
it's like this scene. It's just nothing but
mm-hmm,
music and people and sweat and sex.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
then as you were telling me that, I just had this thought as you were saying this to me. You gave me an epiphany. I was like, oh my God. The first time we see them dancing in Dirty Dancing is a juke joint scene. It's been
Mm-hmm,
co-opted.
mm-hmm,
Am
mm-hmm,
I wrong?
mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I
I
mean,
hadn't even thought about that till you said that.
and that's why it's funny that the white folks are trying to get into the juke because that's what they were always trying to do. Like, and they're always trying to
Like
go
this?
down to the juke to to be in there. Like, I mean, they wanna sweat too. They wanna sweat
They
too.
want
They
to get,
wanna
yeah.
feel
Yeah.
they want to feel the ecstatic release that comes from being able to sort of gather together to dance,
Mm-hmm.
to drink, to gamble, to shout, to fight, to whatever. There, everybody wants that. Everybody needs that. And I think that certainly you've got this situation where the reason why the twins want to build the juke is one because they know it will generate money because people need these kinds of spaces, and for some reason there's a there's a vacuum, and they feel like they can step into it, which is funny because Del Rolindo's character tells them, "I play over here every night. You're gonna have to really convince me to come over to your juke to leave my sure thing for your
Mm.
new thing." But they create with the help of a lot of folks. They create this space, and folks come. They make an announcement. They make a viral announcement down at the train depot,
That day.
and people
Yeah.
come. That day tonight, tonight people come through, and I think there's something that is already transcendent about a place that is the after work leisure pleasure spot, and then again to embed that scene to elevate our understanding of how transcendent these spaces are, and really again to elevate the juke joint scene period, because I've seen some bad juke joint scenes often, sometimes even done by Black directors. I've seen some
I'm begging you to
bad
come
juke
back
joint
on for
scenes.
like 14 other pods at this point, right? Like we're
I done
Sandra
seen
Shitty
some bad juke
Films,
joint
episode
scenes.
6.
Juke joint scenes and accents that will
Oh,
cause me to
we can do an
murder.
accent one. Start with Con Air and Nicolas Cage.
Please. Oh, bless. Oh God, that was so bad. Oh wow, I had put that out of my mind, and then I immediately heard
I've
it.
ruined your
Yeah,
day.
it's
Mission
bad.
accomplished. Oh, all right. I started to get you fired up on Remick earlier. Can we talk about him because I think he's fantastic.
Oh my goodness. I mean, gosh, she's beautiful in this. First off, and the cunning is obviously we're supposed to expect that vampires have this level of cunning,
Sure.
but this is a whole other level of cunning that he has. Again, he uses the anti-indigenous sentiment of the characters of the couple to immediately get them, and now he has got an Irish trio he can sing shanties with and hypnotize people. And I think again, I'm not mad at the vampire aspect. I felt some kind of way about the way they explained that this music attracted all kinds of spirits. So while we're seeing the ancestors on the dance floor and the deities and other spirits from all across time on the dance floor, we are also led to think that this music is also attracting these undead entities who want and need a portal to be able to access people that they cannot access because they are undead and living forever. And I think if we go back to thinking about the crossroads, there is this line between the living and the dead, where there are the living on one side and the dead on the other. And if you are living, you cannot access them. But also, if you are undead, you cannot access them. You're kind of in this liminal space where you can be involved with the living, but mostly you just want to eat and devour them to create more people to hang out with in a way. So I you know, I think that's where the wires get a little crossed in how that lore and sort of how the fantastic aspect functions. But I think that if we just think of the vampire as an undead thing with a ravenous appetite, then of course it's a wonderful metaphor for whiteness, particularly in the South. This kind of thing that will never die and that lives on the suffering of others, and that it necessitates more undeadness. And I think what's also an almost equally powerful scene in a different way is them outside dancing and singing the shanty. They're river dancing. They are, and Remick is the lead. And at some point, they have turned a lot of the Black folks who have left the juke joint in a hurry after there is this instance of violence. And so I think that what we're seeing is Kugler kind of meditating on how to think about this, how to represent or metaphorically represent a supernatural force that is attracted to this sound of the blues, which, as we have been warned in the outset by a marvelous Saul Williams preacher, that this is sort of the devil's music, which is a common sentiment, during this time from churchy folks. This kind of need to put a line between the sacred and the secular. That blues is this awful secular devil music. But also we know that tons of blues people playing the juke at night at church on Sunday morning, as Sammy, as Miles Caton's character endeavors to be, actually.
One of the things I thought was really interesting, first of all, the thing I love about Kugler, beyond all of the mystics and spectacles and things like that, is the trust that he has in the audience. Okay. And by this, I mean, he gives these, I'm talking the smallest, tiniest little details about Remick's life and where he's from and why he's doing what, and he's asking you to do the work, to figure it out on your own, and trusting you to get there. And I think you and I are both seeing the same thing on this guy. But we're talking about the relatability of him. Because he's talking about, there are a couple of lines. Yes. I think maybe Delroy Lindo says this a little bit later in the film too. Because Remick's like, well, this religion was forced on my people, right? And
this religion was forced on us too,
right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is a class story.
Yes, it's a class story. It immediately makes it a sort of story about colonialism. Because I'm reminded that when the Queen of England died, there were these memes, right?
Ireland was having a good day.
Irish people, Nigerian people, Jamaican people, all these people sort of doing their dance, right? Doing whatever their local dance was. They're all sort of doing it together. This idea that we're all oppressed by this broader force. And of course, I'm down for any kind of cross-racial class solidarity as long as you're not trying to make me a vampire.
Oh, come on. Come on.
it's a, it's a tempting thing, but I'm, reminded of Death Becomes Her, when Bruce Willis's character says, "What am I going to do? Hang out with y'all? Like live forever? What do you mean? I don't want to do that." And we see that Wumi's character, Annie, is very like, "No, just kill me. Kill me."
Mhm.
She's seen it in the bones. She's seen what's
Oh.
going to unfold. She's like, "Look, drive the stake through my heart." But Remick has made a case.
Mhm.
He's made a case. He has said, these are the things, like this religion was forced on us too. I too can pray the Lord's Prayer. It don't even work on me. I too can pray the Lord's Prayer because I'm outside of no religion. In fact, because, and I think that's such a powerful testament when Sammy is praying the Lord's Prayer, because it's kind of like, this is all I can do. This is all I know to turn to. And this is something that we might see at any sort of key moment when you're finna battle evil. Pray the Lord's Prayer. The Lord's Prayer doesn't work because it's a false, right? Because it's not a thing that we have. The real things that work in this film are Annie's African traditional religion, descendant works, her hoodoo, and light, and the power of music used in a particular kind of way, right? Once that guitar makes a not beautiful sound, when he clangs it over Remick's head, then there's this shockwave that goes out. And it's that reminds me of Sun Ra. You've got this music that is in some ways aharmonious and cacophonous, because this is how you bring about the new world. When you're making the new world, it doesn't sound pretty. Like, can you imagine the sounds at the beginning of a universe? Like, this is what, like, it sounds like. And so to have this crack and this sound that is so like awful sounding, it harms them. It's what slows them down and ultimately makes it so that the sun can come up and send everybody, dead the undead.
Can I tell you a thought I just had while you were telling me that? Because you were just opening up like things in my brain right now, which is this. Like, okay, so when we're talking about in terms of music, right? The first time that we see Remick with the two clan members, right, who he's turned, right, and then they go to the juke joint and they start playing, right? And they start playing whatever, I can't recall the song.
Yes.
One of the instruments they're playing is a banjo, right? The banjo is like the symbol of like Appalachian music, right? Really like white folk in the mountains, right? But that ain't where banjo is from. Banjo is from Africa,
right? But it's an African instrument, yes,
right? And I don't quite know what to say here about that, other than the fact that here's another instrument that's been taken and made. And listen, if you like a banjo,
and
play
Remick
banjo,
says in that one of those climatic moments, we want your songs and we want your stories.
Yes.
And honestly, let me say this. Let me just say this. In a different film, not so well done, that would have seemed heavy-handed. If Jordan Peele had done that, that would have seemed heavy-handed in a way. But we understand, like, on a cosmic level, because Coogler has set it up for us. We understand on an interpersonal level between Remick and Sammy. We understand on a community level between these sort of working class white folks and these working class black folks. We understand on this kind of more hegemonic level, just white and black. And in fact, or white and non-white. We understand it on that level. And we understand it on this cosmic level of kind of like, what is this topsy-turvy world that we have come into where so much can be stolen? Like, we understand it on all those levels, and it just works. And we see, obviously, again, because when we're talking about conversations of appropriation, those, can get tired sometimes, because it's like, we're all culture sharing all the time, whatever. Right. It's the low hanging fruit. But just to point out, like, yeah, this is a Black instrument, and this is Black, but that's also why I love that they are singing traditional Irish songs, because they too come from a cultural tradition, and their cultural tradition is something that has been covered over in some ways by colonialist powers. And literally, they have been physically repressed, bombed, all these sorts of things. And then, of course, to come to America and to be on the lowest totem pole of whiteness, if we're doing a hierarchy of white ethnicities. But, and also, these are the same folks who joined the police force, who became overseers, who, you know, were patty rollers and all these kinds of things. These are the same folks who, in order to gain access to the kind of whiteness that would give them a particular kind of power, they engaged in violence, theft, all these things towards white. And so that is also to Remick as well.
I felt like when they were dancing on the Remick song, and I'm sitting there and I'm like kicking down my feet and I'm like, holy shit, I'm dancing with the bad guys here. I'm like a little bit.
Yes.
This is good, right?
The song slapped.
It's so good.
Slapped. The dancing slapped. The song slapped. We all wanted to do it.
I gotta find the soundtrack or the score of this on Spotify or something like that because it's so good.
Yes.
All right, I want to ask you. We both saw this over the weekend. I'm less than 24 hours from seeing this film. Are there parts of this that you're going to dwell on? Because I think you and I are both still processing this movie. We both want to see it again. Like, what are the things you think are going to stick with you moving forward on this movie?
Yeah, I think Wunmi and Annie's character is going to stick with me as a really good representation of a medicine woman, as an excellent addition to the medicine woman pantheon. And I would love that's going to stick with me for a while. I think, you know, a show like P-Valley had a sequence where there's kind of like hoodoo work being done. I was reminded of the film To Sleep with Anger, when they can't come in the door, right? Obviously, on the one hand, that's like a vampire thing, but it's really a hoodoo thing. That a spirit with evil intent, they need to be invited in order to have sort of permission, especially if Miss Annie is up in there. You know, her power, like her power as an actress and within the film is suffused, you know, through the juke, through everywhere that she is on screen and into the afterlife. And I will also think a lot about that scene where she's on the other side and Smoke is dying, and also being distracted by the dying Klansman and like finishing shooting him to death. And she's like, you know, you can come over here. You can hold the baby if you put that cigarette out. I think that is powerful because they have chosen. He chooses when she knows what's going to happen because she's thrown the bones and seen, and he chooses to take off the mojo.
Yes.
In order that he will die in this shootout, so that he can be with her. And so I think that will stay with me a lot. Obviously, that marvelous time traveling dance floor scene. We didn't talk about this scene, but when Stack and Sammy and DeRolindo's character are in the car, and the story is being told. He's telling a story about a friend of his that was lynched and castrated. That story, again, it's a brief moment in the film. It reminds me a little bit. It gives you a little August Wilson there. It gives you a little piano lesson there, and where you can see it's kind of it's a callback to Whining Boy, where you this kind of terrible things happen in these Black folks' lives, and this is why they're drinking Irish beer or whatever. This is why they might be, you know, trying to deal with the trauma of these things. But I think the way that they then turn that into a hum, a beat, a song, and then Miles Caton's character playing that guitar, bring the guitar in, then there's something just easy and also difficult but powerful about the way that Black folks transform that pain. So I think that's one that will stick with me. So even though, like, no matter how, like, cliche or whatever or difficult that scene might be, it really functions to talk about the power of transformation, which is going to continue to happen. Are you going to transform into a vampire? Are you going to transform into an ancestor? Or are you going to transform into Buddy Guy?
That'd be fine. I'm like,
that'd be fine. I
well,
thought that was marvelous.
Well, the thing, towards the end of the credits, they start playing the credits, but the movie's still going. It's like, and Buddy Guy, I'm like, I haven't seen Buddy Guy in this movie yet. And then
Buddy Guy.
And then, like, it goes, it's like, what, 1988 or something like that? I think they or 92?
Yeah, 1992.
Stack shows up with the hair, right?
Yes.
Remember?
Yes.
And Buddy Guy, I'm like,
and Mary's still there.
I know. I'm like, I don't want to dilute this movie by following their story across the 20th century.
Yes.
But at the same time, like, all I can think is, what did they do for the next 60 years? Where did they go? What did they do?
Shenanigans.
Yeah,
just absolute
something.
Shenanigans. I want to follow what happens with Smoke and Annie in the afterlife.
Thank you.
Because when Sammy's character as Buddy Guy, the older Sammy, says, that was a good day before the vampires showed up.
Before all the murder, we were having a great time.
Before all the murder and undeadness, we were having a great time.
Right.
And Stack says, yeah, that was the last time I saw my brother. And so this tremendous distance between these very close brothers is something that I will ponder, because it is and isn't a choice. It's not, Stack doesn't entirely have a choice, but they are on the opposite sides of these things, and they will not see each other.
Well, I think that's what Coogler does so well in his other works. When you talk about, like, Black Panther, you do talk about Creed.
Mm-hmm.
Creed 2,
yes.
The relationships, between, say, Creed and, say, Rocky, where he's, like, searching for this mentor.
Yes.
It's, this is a father-son kind of a thing, or things like that. But also his ability to reach beyond the into the supernatural and talk about what lay beyond on the other side, right? And I talked that, God, it was so beautiful when he's like, when you were saying, like, she put that cigarette out, because that's a story we would have heard, right? That's what
Yes.
Like what a wife would have said. It was like, go wash up and you come play with the baby or whatever,
Yes.
Also, I felt the powerful need to go and work out after watching this film. That's where Jordan is, like, got the Tommy gun and the pipes are like this, and I'm like, maybe. I
mean, the physicality. The physicality of the film, I was looking at the stunt players, and there's not a whole, there are some, but there's not like the list. The physicality of the work is, first off, the choreography of the work is really excellent. And of course, the feat of special effects that allows the two to be together in these ways is something else.
This movie screamed to me, Jason, put down the butter pecan, is what this movie told me. Like we talked about earlier, like, what's your favorite? I mean, come on, 15 minutes of, like, shooting the KKK. I was like, oh, yes. Okay, this is like dessert.
Again, there are so many other films in which that would not have worked. There are so many other directors. There are so many other actors for whom that would have not, but it was perfect.
Yeah, it was perfect. All right, let me ask you this final question then. Zandria, is Sinners a history movie?
Sinners is absolutely a history movie. Sinners does nuance the way that historians ask us to do, the way that, as much as can be done in a film, the way that makes you curious. You got to get curious about something. I didn't know that there were Chinese people in Mississippi. Let me think about this class relationship with Irish people. Let me think about the Choctaw, because wait a minute now. The Choctaw will also stay with me because they're like, hey, we just
I want to see a movie on Choctaw vampire hunters. Can we follow that group on the next day?
And it's like, but they're more than vampire hunters, because they are the keepers of the spiritual balance. Something is over here that is not supposed to be on this side. We're dealing with it along with all the other things, because we're trying to keep the earth balanced, we're trying to keep climate balanced, we're trying to keep everything balanced. But also to them saying, all right, we told y'all the sun is going down, we must go. And I think that's an aspect of the history, both indigenous power, indigenous spirituality, thinking about the fact that this is post Trail of Tears, and this community is still here and active and preserving and protecting, where other people don't even know what's going on, because they have seen every kind of spirit, every kind of entity and non-entity that there can be. And so I think that there's that power too, in just telling us an aspect of history that we're not typically thinking about. And the migration questions here, I think, are wonderful, because in the end, just like in Idlewild, Andre 3000's character ends up in Chicago, and he's playing piano in Chicago, and his career is there, and Rooster stays in the South. In the end, Sammy's character ends up in Chicago, and Stack comes to find him there, has located him there. And I think that thinking about where Black people went, the mapping, like how they navigated the U.S., I think we need to continue to think about that, especially as this particular historical moment animates both desires for a community like Clarksdale, but also makes them more difficult to access.
I was so excited about this film, and then I was really excited to talk to you. And now, Zandria, all I want to do is talk to you more about other stuff, because you are amazing. And I want you back on for every single podcast ever. I'm going to need for you to clear out every Thursday, every seventh Thursday. This has been so much fun. Oh my God, thank you so much for taking the time.
This was amazing. I love this. I love this so much. Thank you for having me. This was a blast. I love to be able to talk about films. I love to be able to talk about Southern films. We're talking about Southern films with a Southerner.
Murray State University owes us some money on this one. So
they do. They should give us some, but they ain't got no money.
Right? This is not sponsored by the Racers. So, Zandria Robinson, thank you so much. This has been a blast.
Thank you so much, Jason. Take care.
And that's a wrap here at Historians at the Movies podcast. Thank you so very much to Zandria Robinson. Oh my God, you are amazing. This was the most amazing time. Thank you. Come be on the podcast always, please. Thank you, of course, to our producer, Fletcher Powell, for making this show run. Fletcher, we could not do this show without you. I would not want to do this show without you. And thank you, of course, most of all, to all of you for continuing to come in. For our new listeners, thank you for being here. If you want to help support the pod, you can leave a review on Apple Podcasts. You can tell your friends about it. You can share this podcast on social media. You can also find our Substack at jasonherbert.substack.com. Guys, thank you so much for being here. We have so many more amazing pods coming up for you. So make sure you subscribe, and we will catch you later. Ciao for now. Bye.